Hello everyone, David here. It's that time of year again, the baubles are hanging, the sleigh bells are ringing, and here comes my annual roundup of my favourite VR games, and a kind of commentary on the state of the industry. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking it's been a quiet year for VR, since there's been no massive release like Half-Life Alyx. And to some extent that's true, but there have actually been quite a few new games, easily enough to flesh out my top 10, even though I'm not primarily a VR gamer. I've mostly been playing The Witcher 3 again, and Halo Infinite, which is fun. Even though we didn't get a new VR headset, the Oculus, or should I say Meta, Quest 2 is the headset that keeps on giving. Over the last year we got reliable hand tracking, a 120Hz screen update, and AirLink, which meant you could play all your Rift games without cables, and with only a tiny sacrifice to quality and latency. So, a bit of a mixed bag of nuts then, and while I can't point to a single killer app, let me at least steer you towards 10 titles that I played, and I think are worth talking about. Before we do the top 10, I want to give some honourable mentions. Resident Evil 4 is not on the list. It looks great, like a really good conversion, but I just don't like horror games, sorry, so I didn't play it. After the Fall looks pretty good, but I didn't pick it up for the same reason. And Battle Sister, I still haven't actually had a chance to buy it and play it, but it looks alright. Okay, without further ado, let's get started.
Thank you.
Number 10. Baba Yaga. Here's a charming animated story with some light gameplay elements and choices to make as the story progresses. What I love is that the choices are organic. You don't simply pick a flashing menu button. It actually changes depending on how you interact with the world. It supports hand tracking, and that can make the interactions a little janky, but still I think worth it overall, or you can pick up controllers for a more traditional experience. If you're up for a fun, short story with some other choices to explore once you're done, you should enjoy this one.
We've got to get out of here.
Vse było czudowo.
Я рада це чути.
Number 9. Mondly. You might be thinking, David has clearly gone mad. He thinks a language learning tool is a game. Well, you're probably right, but I still recommend you give Mondly a go. It actually makes learning a language fun. It may not win any awards for cutting-edge graphics or animation, but it puts you on the spot in a role-play situation and forces you to try to understand what is being said to you in the language you want to learn. There are some hints, and since it's all a simulation, you don't feel under pressure from a real person to respond. It uses voice recognition in all the supported languages, and this is a somewhat hit-and-miss affair. You might feel like you nailed the pronunciation, but the text it thinks you said doesn't resemble reality at all. If you can get past these quirks, you'll find an experience, let's say, that fits so well to VR, and if you're trying to learn a new language, this is a great tool for that. Maybe don't buy it for the gameplay, but buy it if you're planning a trip to Kiev.
Ja by wypił kawu z molokom.
Щось ще?
Oh my god, I told them a million times the microwave is broken and I can't fix it!
Number 8. Captain Toonhead vs. the Punks. TerraVision Games have taken classic tower defense and smooshed it into VR here, and liberally sprinkled some Futurama-esque comedy over the top. On the whole, it works, and it tickles that destructive itch as legions of bad guys run headlong into your turrets. You can supplement the slaughter by taking pot shots yourself, although it does get a bit overwhelming when there are slightly too many enemies, and you have to dash around between the turrets to try to tip the balance in your favour. If you're into this genre already, and like the zany comedy and cartoonish design, you'll probably enjoy your time here. There's a decent upgrade system, and a variety of turrets to try out, and of course, all their combinations where it makes sense to freeze your enemies first, then pelt them with bullets, are worthy of some experimentation. It's somewhat self-aware, and the humorous voice acting just carries it over the mark for a recommendation.
Go into your room, I mean the weapons lab, and try it out.
Climbing down, the girl's footing slips as the ladder gives way. She begins a seemingly endless fall.
Number 7. Down the Rabbit Hole. Cortopia Studios have written a love letter to Alice in Wonderland, and through this game you can experience a kind of magical exploration into their world, complete with bizarre fantasy characters, talking cards, and beautiful cel-shaded scenes. You move around by grabbing the roots, which works well for grounding you, no pun intended, but does get a bit tiresome as you have to keep returning to the mechanic every time you move more than a screen. I can't help wondering if some automatic camera, at the cost of a bit of comfort, might have streamlined the experience. You play by poking the environment with your controllers, while also direct controlling the protagonist, and you get to make some choices about the character, and during conversations with the other denizens of the world. It's all beautifully put together, but the puzzles are sometimes not obvious and may have you looking for an overcomplicated answer as the voiceover chimes in with yet another hint. It's worth a look as a finely polished curiosity in VR, although it didn't pull me in quite enough to complete the game. As the dialogue drags on, you may start to feel like you're late for a very important date.
Most celestial of animals.
I'm not entirely sure you should be smoking that.
Number 6. Carly and the Reaperman. Odd Raven Studios have put together something rather special here. A possible solo, but much better co-op platformer, where one player takes control of a sprightly young platformer, and the other a floating ambivalent spirit who can move platforms and interact with the environment to help. The game throws a series of tightly designed puzzles at you, and you must work together, sometimes against the clock, to move the parts into the right places and jump between them with accuracy. It puts me in mind of the abstract puzzle sections interspersed between the levels in Super Mario Sunshine, and purists will be pleased here with the minimal focus on story and lavish attention to the gradually revealed gameplay elements. Some of my favourite parts are where you must trust your partner stepping onto invisible platforms, a la Indiana Jones, relying on this guidance against your best instincts as a solo player. If you want the equivalent of couch co-op, but in VR, look no further. Just make sure your partner won't mind many repeated attempts as you shuffle off platforms or walk into fireballs. Number 5. Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. I'm not sure there's all that much to say about this one. It's the same great game I reviewed on Rift last year, ported rather brilliantly to the Quest 2. Some of my complaints, such as the wooden faces and peculiar animation, remain the same, but it's actually very impressive what they've managed to carry over to a mobile device.
Keep an eye on the lighthouse. We're supposed to look for a signal. Works for me.
It's still a hefty download size, an eye-watering 45 gigabytes on Quest, which means if you only have the 64 gig model, you may find you have to uninstall everything else in order to play it. But it's a AAA game with lots of content and some satisfying gameplay, so worth picking up if you want to blast through the campaign and haven't already played it pre-port.
This is the best plan ever!
Oh, hey! Welcome in! If you're thirsty, you're in the right place!
Number 4. Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge. This actually came out over a year ago, but it got a lot of content added this year, so I'm now considering it complete enough for a review in my hands. ILMX Lab are back, and while I would probably say I prefer their previous outings in the Vader Immortal trilogy, this is pretty good as well, and plants you solidly back in the Star Wars universe. You take the role of a suspiciously adept droid trader and mow down legions of bots, bounty hunters, and local wildlife in your way to completing mundane tasks such as reclaiming cargo or picking fruit. It can get a little samey, and the sheer number of hot spots on my own body from which I can grab my pistol, multi-tool, health packs, or utility sleeve makes me miss the purity of Vader Immortal with its force powers and lightsaber. But the gunplay is fluid, and you will enjoy the 30 seconds of fun as you toss a remote droid into the air, reload your weapon, and pop out of cover to let loose a few more laser blasts. I feel like it's lacking some kind of human element that their previous title supplemented with your sassy sidekick droid and Darth Vader himself quite well. It needs some kind of Princess Leia or Obi-Wan to give it that little extra charisma boost and make it a beloved title instead of just a competent one. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll love it. Otherwise, you'll probably still enjoy it. Check it out.
But smaller.
Do you have the strength to seek out and destroy the Keeper below?
Number 3. Demeo. When I first saw this, I have to admit I was dubious. A board game, you say? In VR? With little models you pick up and move around? Well, it works great. The animations are actually done to perfection, keeping the physicality of the player models intact, while allowing them room to breathe when they attack or take damage. It's basically a lovingly faithful recreation of Hero Quest, and while it's okay as a single-player game, it really shines when you connect to a game online and take on the challenge as a team. Your abilities can complement each other, and when you fully understand the game, it's quite satisfying to use your cards effectively and dish out damage to passing monsters, and maybe even the hapless boss if you're particularly well prepared. Navigation is well thought out, and it won't take long to become quite at home in the dark, dank dungeons. I recommend you dip into the multiplayer and set aside some time to be a hero in your quest. Make sure you have a full battery though, because it could end up a long play session.
Pico! Not have come here.
Number 2. Blade and Sorcery Nomad. Blade and Sorcery recently received a port for Quest, and despite a mild graphical downgrade, the gameplay is present and correct. Everything has a brutal sense of heft to it, and it's really fun to experiment with the various weapons, spells, and environments. Enemies will attack you relentlessly, forcing you to defend yourself, or more likely, attack back with surprising intensity. In fact, you may discover you have a bit of a bloodthirsty side as you hack and slash your way through the arenas and dungeons, quickly becoming desensitized to the impalements and bodily fluids that gush forth. It feels like a bit of a breakthrough in terms of game physics and immersion, and I'm excited to see what Warp Frog have in store for future updates. Just find a bit of time for a quiet cup of tea and a sit down once you're finished, and maybe count to 100 before returning to civilized society.
Good morning, sunshine. How are we feeling?
I don't know, Captain.
Do you know?
And at the top spot, it's Lone Echo 2. This is actually the only game for desktop PC VR on this list, and is probably the last exclusive we'll ever get for the Oculus Rift. But what a great way to go out. The space station and its contents, especially your human companion Liv, is beautifully rendered, and you really get the sense she is alive while you explore together. There are a number of quite satisfying puzzles to solve that ramp up in complexity, and while you have to deal with some annoying enemies at times, it never feels so horrible that I wanted to shut it off. A problem that did plague me in Half-Life Alyx, and really any horror game that thinks it's a good idea to make its players feel horrible. I love the metallic aesthetic of the station and your tools, and the story is like something from an indie space movie like Moon. The character development is well paced, and I'm keen to see how the story unravels. If you have a decent PC, definitely pick this title up, and it works very well over Airlink if you have the Quest instead of a Rift. It was a no-brainer to place this in the top spot, and it just makes me wonder what Ready at Dawn will do or could do for Lone Echo 3.
Well, what do you think? Bit of a step up, wouldn't you say?
I like it. A marked improvement over your old EVA suit.
My old EVA suit was being held together by duct tape. I'd certainly hope this was an improvement.
So there you go, that's my top 10. I'm actually a little sad we won't get any more Rift exclusive titles in the vein of Asgard's Wrath or Stormland, since Meta, are clearly focusing on the Quest now. But it does mean developers will be pushing native wireless games harder, and we'll continue to see graphical improvements coming along. It will just take a while to catch up with PC VR. I think there will be critics that look at this and say, VR is dying, but what I really think is happening is VR is changing. We're getting away from clunky lighthouses and more cables than a Van Halen stadium concert, and instead VR is finding its convenience niche. And that's a really good thing, because no popular technology you use on a daily basis became popular because it was difficult. Your phone, computer, TV are all as easy to use as possible. Hopefully, VR will continue to establish itself and become this mass-market technology that we want it to be. What may be next is the advent of very impressive AR, as Project Cambria looks to be bringing full colour pass-through into the mix, and we could see the fusion of the digital and real world. Yes, maybe all this talk of a metaverse is not so crazy, and at the very least I'm expecting some interesting AR titles to crop up, and some cool benefits of having digital widgets available while you navigate your real sitting room. Okay, well, I hope you found this video interesting, or at least a little bit educational. If so, please hit the like button down below, and you can help me out by subscribing to my channel as well. See you next time.